All right, guys, welcome back to this Q&A episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. So I know it's been a few weeks since I've done one of these, between traveling to the Arnold and now moving cross country with a baby, settled in to the great state of North Carolina in our new house. I think moving forward, I'll do these Q&As, every 2 to 3 weeks. When I space it out a little bit, I tend to get some more thoughtful questions and just hit some better discussion points. That way I'm not getting kind of repeat questions, doing this every week and then just becoming redundant with it. So I'll space these out a bit, but I'll continue cranking them out. And of course, every Tuesday, there will be more guest episodes of the podcast coming up. Stay tuned. This Tuesday, I'm going to drop my episode with Shane Hunt, who is an incredibly freakish young powerlifter and just freak of strength in general. So had a good conversation with him. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive right into these questions. As always, I'm just reading them in real time and shooting from the hip here. If I don't get to your question, it was either one that's been asked recently and I've already covered it. Maybe there wasn't quite enough context to really go into a discussion, or maybe it was just kind of a inappropriate question to begin with. So, all right. Number one, would you consider going back to collegiate or pro strength and conditioning again? So I'm never going to say never. I'm never just going to completely close that door. You never know if the right employer at the right job for the right money in the right situation comes along. It's always something that you want to keep open on the table and consider. With that said, I would say it's highly unlikely. I cherished my time working in football strength and conditioning. The last 9 years, getting to work in college football and the NFL has made me who I am today. It has made me the coach I am. I've made some incredible relationships, learned from some incredible people, and got to work with some amazing athletes. So with that said, I'm loving what I get to do now. I love just having complete autonomy of what I do. I love getting to work with a variety of different types of people. My first love was strength sports, strongman, powerlifting, bodybuilding, those things. And now I get to work with all those competitors and those athletes, which is obviously something I don't get to do working in football. And I still work with football guys. I've got a handful of NFL nutrition clients, college athletes, high school athletes. So I'm getting all the best of the worlds that I still love. And I'm able to set my own schedule, travel, put effort into my own training and content production and do the podcast. So to be honest, I think it's unlikely that I'll go back to working for a team. All right, next question. How do you consume glucose disposal agents better spread throughout the day or all at once? So an example of a classic glucose disposal agent, an over-the-counter supplement would be berberine. Berberine is very effective at lowering blood sugar. The one downfall about most berberine products is its bioavailability in your system is going to be very short-lived. It's going to be in and out quickly. And for ultimately reducing blood sugar, we want it in the system longer. So Troponin Supplements has a product called Suppressor Max. It's a high dose of berberine HCl, but it's also got some complementary ingredients in it that extend the life of the berberine in your system. And with a product like that, you can take it, you can spread it out evenly across all of your meals. You can just take the entire dose with your most densely carbohydrate, the meal with the most carbohydrates in it. Now, if you're just taking a standard berberine, that's what I would do. Because it's so short-lived, I would make sure you have it in during the time you're consuming the most carbs. So if that's your pre-workout or your post-workout meal, I would take it with that meal. Now, other examples of glucose disposal agents, some that, a very common one that people don't necessarily realize is an effective glucose disposal agent is ground cinnamon. So I really like putting cinnamon on basically everything I can, all my carbohydrate sources throughout the day, whether it's on my cream of rice, in my oatmeal, even, if I'm eating grits or something like that. I really like utilizing ground cinnamon. Okay, next question. Do you have a preferred salt to water ratio for your pre and intra workout? So I generally speaking, I'll use a 32-ounce shaker of fluids. And for the most part, I prefer in my intra shake to use coconut water because it's such a natural, rich source of potassium, which is the other crucial component of this equation, right? It's water, it's salt, and it's potassium. So I want my salt and my water, my salt and my potassium roughly at a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect, right? If you have 1.5 grams of potassium and 1.2 grams of salt, no big deal. You're in the ballpark. But generally, I'll have about 32 ounces of fluid. And within that, I'll have 1.5 grams of potassium, either from coconut water or from some other electrolytes packet, or even just straight up potassium HCl. And then I'll match that with the equivalent amount of pink salt. So it's about a 32 ounce fluid to 1.5 grams of salt to 1.5 grams of potassium ratio. Now, does it have to be 32 ounces of fluid? No, not necessarily, but I would get at least 24 ounces in there if you're doing 1 gram or more of salt. Okay, let's see. Next question. What health markers would you look at before starting PED use as a strength athlete? Yeah, so the most important, in my opinion, the most important health metric that you can track as a big lifter in general, or especially a lifter that's utilizing PEDs, is going to be your blood pressure. Your blood pressure, or I should say chronically high blood pressure, is the most common culprit for ultimately prematurely killing big lifters using steroids, right? So monitor your blood pressure pre-cycle, and then monitor it during a cycle if that's what you're doing. And I would strongly recommend utilizing some sort of a blood pressure medication like telmisartan, a very common ARB, or you could use an ACE inhibitor. Even if you just use it prophylactically and take a small dose, blood pressure, that is one that is crucial to stay on top of. Keep an eye on that. That's going to be the most common culprit. Now, in terms of just looking at your typical blood work panel, if you get on gear, your lipids are going to take a negative hit. Can you attenuate this? Sure, by limiting the use of AIs for just, keeping your doses somewhat moderate, and then having a really solid diet, maintaining some base of aerobic cardio, even if it's just lots of walking. These are all things that can contribute positively towards your lipids, but it's always good to, kind of look at it before and during on blood work with all these metrics, just to see, okay, which of these variables is getting negatively impacted by a cycle. By having pre-cycle, before you ever start any of this stuff, just having a baseline of these numbers. And this may not even be so much of a quote unquote, am I healthy enough to start? This might just simply be, let me just see where I am without anything in me. That way I can know what is being directly affected by the PEDs when I check it, mid-cycle. Everyone's going to be affected differently, and that's often just based on a genetic response. So look at your lipids, look at, your liver and kidney markers. Now, this is often one that is going to be bastardized with the liver. Your ALT and your AST are often going to be out of range if you have recently trained. If you trained a day or two before you took your blood work, usually your liver enzymes will be elevated, and it's not a result of any actual liver toxicity. It's just a matter of the stress and inflammation on the system from training often deranges those numbers. And that's the same thing with your BUN and your creatinine. These are often deranged by having recently trained, high protein diets. Now, there's something to keep an eye on if they get drastically out of range, but if they're slightly elevated, oftentimes it's a result of training. Um, you've got your hematocrit. Your blood can get thicker um, if using testosterone and other anabolics. If it gets drastically out of range, it's something to possibly consider, to consider donating blood. It's not something I would do overly frequently, but if you do that once or twice a year, if your hematocrit is high, that can be something that's helpful. But overall, man, the one I would track more than anything is going to be your blood pressure. Moving on to the next question. All right, strongman specific, what is a good warm-up routine? So I would tailor your warm-up based on, what are the main movements of the day in the training session? What are the events that you're training? If it's some sort of an explosive overhead movement or any sort of explosive triple extension movement, whether that's, a log clean and press, whether that's even a stone session, anything like that, I would do something explosive within your warm up just to prime yourself up. Whether that's just doing some, low level box jumps, whether that's doing some, light sandbag throws over bar, doing some med ball throws, something like that. Just waking up that CNS, priming yourself to be explosive. And I particularly like the box jumps or the bag throws because you're specifically kind of dialing in that explosive triple extension if that's what you're doing as your main work within the session. Now if you're doing just a press day, it's an upper body focus day, I would do something to open up your overhead mobility. One movement that I actually like that kind of kills two birds with one stone for an overhead press session is doing ab rollouts, using an ab wheel on your knees. And it opens up the overhead mobility as you extend forward, open up through the lats and the shoulders. But then it's also getting your core activated. Obviously, if you're strict pressing or doing, any sort of standing press, your core is going to be engaged in this. So the kneeling ab wheel kind of kills the two birds with one stone of overhead mobility and getting your core firing. If you're doing a deadlift session, usually I'll want to do some sort of neutral spine core work, whether that's, planks, front and side planks, whether that's isometric glute bridges, whether that's, Copenhagen planks, dead bugs, things like that. I would get the core musculature around your trunk, get all of that firing, all the muscles there stiff. So your low back is supported and ready to go. So just determine what is the main lift, what is the main event, and then, do the warm up should be specific to that. If there's a mobility demand for that lift or for that event, address that mobility demand within the warm up. If you're squatting, ankle mobility might be something to address within your warm up. And I prefer with all mobility work, some sort of loaded mobility, getting to end range under resistance, even if it's body weight. So if I'm opening up ankle mobility, getting in the seated calf raise machine so you're getting loaded dorsiflexion, doing some sort of a calf raise, where your ball of your foot is on a block or a plate, so you're able to get that extended range of motion with the heel into deep dorsiflexion. So if there's a mobility demand, address that within the lift. If it's a very, explosive, gnarly, demanding session, then I would do something low volume and explosive in your warm up, getting it primed up. If it's very low back demanding, I would do a good bit of neutral spine core work just to get all that musculature around the low back firing and stiff. Okay, moving on to the next question. How to control LDL on PEDs. So again, I just touched on this. A lot of times if you're using an aromatase inhibitor, an AI, this is wreaking havoc on the lipids. And I see a lot of people who use an AI when they probably don't need to. If you are someone who is legitimately prone to estrogen issues and you experience them, or you're utilizing, a particularly high amount of testosterone, then by all means use an AI. But if you're just using a low to moderate dose of stuff and you have not actually really experienced significant estrogen issues, I would encourage you to try not using an AI. Oftentimes the AI can be worse on your on your blood work than the gear itself. So oftentimes that can be an issue. A lot of times it's diet related. If you can get just some healthier fats in there, salmon, fish oil, avocados, things like that, good healthy monounsaturated fats, that can improve those numbers. Just being more active, doing some sort of cardio, walking, that can help. But generally, if you're running a significant cycle, your lipids probably are going to be out of range, no matter what you do. Let's see. How long do you suggest staying in a fat loss phase? So this depends a little bit on the goal. If you're a bodybuilder, it's easy, right? The end of the fat loss phase is you've got a set date, you've got a set competition date. Now, sometimes your fat loss phase will end a couple weeks before the show, and then you're kind of just maintaining and holding peak condition for a couple weeks as you lead into competition. But assuming we're not talking about a bodybuilder here with a set date, this kind of comes down to when do if you have a body composition, a visual goal in mind, sometimes it's just a matter of, hey, I'm as lean as I set out to be. I'm as lean as I want to be. To continue dieting any further is just putting, just suffering unnecessarily. So sometimes if it's kind of a lifestyle goal, you're going to get to a point where you're damn lean and you like the way you look, and maybe you don't need to continue dieting at that point. But if you're someone who you're just pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and really want to push it to the as far as you can go before you kind of physiologically no longer benefit from dieting, it depends on when you started. If you're starting from a higher body fat percentage, you're probably not going to just linearly diet all the way down to being shredded with abs, right? You're going to get to a point where you plateau, and then you got to reduce food more. Then you plateau, you reduce food more, and then you get to a point where you just can't really reduce food any further. You've plateaued. You've still got a good bit of body fat on you. At that point, you need to shift gears, reverse diet, build your metabolism up higher than it previously was, stay leaner. That way you go into your next cut from a leaner starting point, and you're able to diet on more food, so then you can take the fat loss even further the second go around. Now, if you're someone who is relatively lean and you're dieting down and you're going to try to get shredded, usually 16 weeks is probably going to often be the max that you're really going to push a deficit. And then you're going to get to a point where either you're so lean and depleted that to go any further is just going to become catabolic. You're going to get to a point where just the hunger signaling is just consuming your life, and to the point you're not sleeping. It's all you think about. That's, do you need to be hungry to get shredded? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be hungry. But there will come a time where it's just like, your body's literally sending the signal that you're starving. And if you get to that point where, okay, you've been dieting for 14, 15, 16 weeks, you're very lean, you're very depleted, your hunger signaling is going crazy, that is your body telling you it's time to shift gears. Also, if you hit a point where you are just across the board regressing in training, which, don't get confused, you will lose some top end leverage based strength as you get lean. Your squat, your bench press might suffer as you lose some of the midsection fluff, as you just lose some of the just pure size. But you'll adapt to your new leverages. That's not true. You're not losing contractile tissue in that situation. But you get to a point where it's just like across the board, everything is starting to regress in training. And it's not just a couple one-off bad sessions, but it's legitimate regression. Then that's a sign that we have waded into catabolic territory, right? You're walking a tightrope with a diet where you're simultaneously losing body fat, but being sure to retain all of your muscle tissue. And the best way you can retain muscle tissue is by maintaining your performance in training, right? Your muscle tissue is going to be somewhat of a reflection of your abilities in training. If you are maintaining your strength or even getting stronger as you lose body fat and lose weight, you can be pretty damn sure you're holding on to your tissue. If you're getting weaker across the board as you get into the deep depths of a diet, you are probably flirting with losing muscle tissue, and that is no longer productive, and it's time to shift gears there. So anyway, bit of a long-winded response to say a typical duration is probably going to be 16 weeks at most. But listen to the body response. That ultimately is going to be the guide, and just those symptoms tend to coincide with that 16-week mark, but that's sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 18, Okay, going into the next question here. What is something that you feel strength athletes at the top level don't do that they should do? So I've always said I think nutrition is usually the missing piece of the puzzle for athletes in general, not just strength athletes. But whether you're an NFL football player, you're an NBA basketball player, or an elite pro strongman, usually nutrition is the missing piece of the puzzle, or it's at least the component that is being executed poorly. I've seen it time and time again. As soon as an athlete or a lifter dials in with their nutrition, just everything else takes off. Whether it's improving your body composition and taking some time to get leaner and drop some body fat to set up a tissue gain phase, whether it's just simply fueling performance better, whether it's just revamping the foods you're eating to improve digestion, to improve gut health, to stabilize blood sugar, to reduce inflammation. Whether it's any of these things, all of them are going to serve to improve performance, improve recovery, improve the way you look. Hydration and electrolyte intake, that's another one that guys tend to skimp on. And I think it's because hydration and electrolyte intake, it's not cool, it's not sexy, it's boring. It's like everyone knows, like, yeah, drink more water, got it. And it kind of slides under the radar as this like this unimportant thing. But when people really dial in their hydration and their electrolyte intake, it's an incredible performance enhancer. And that is always a key component of my nutrition plans that I write for my athletes. I'm huge on the hydration piece. They'll have a significant amount of electrolyte intake programmed for pre-workout. For intra-workout, we're going to be getting potassium and magnesium through whole foods. We're going to be pushing fluids all day. That's a huge piece for me. So while I'm on that note, guys, I'm going to give just a quick update here. My website, hammerchiselperformance.com, is up and running. I've got 3 programs up and ready on the site. I've got an athletic development program. This is a program, it's as if I was programming for an off-season football player. So it covers the weight room and the field work. So you're going to be doing explosive work, strength work, hypertrophy work, moving in all the different planes in the weight room, portion. And then on the field, where I have programmed change of direction, top end max velocity work, acceleration, conditioning. So it is a all-encompassing off-season equivalent that can apply to any team sport athlete or anyone who's just interested in training like an athlete and regaining athleticism. I also have a 10-week powerlifting program. This is for leading into a meet or just simply building up towards 1 rep maxes on the big 3 lifts. And then I have a strongman program. This would be a great program for any strongman competitor to run in their off season. If you're someone who you've been training for a while, but you're kind of new to the sport of strongman, this could be a good first training cycle to run. It's not a, quote unquote, just beginner lifting program, but it's a strongman off-season program that would be appropriate for someone who's relatively new to the sport, but also an advanced competitor. And then I've got my ebook, Transforming After Sports, which is just basically a big manual on, hey, how do I set up my own diet, my own training, my own supplementation? How do I go about just regaining a peak physique on my own? And it's just an educational manual on that. So guys, check out the website. give those check out those programs. And as always, I'll be continuing to post frequently on Instagram, training and nutrition content. You can DM me on there for my coaching services. And then I'm going to be getting more consistent now that I'm moved in and working with a videographer again with my my YouTube videos. So full days of training, full days of eating, all those things. And then, of course, continuing to crank out the podcast. So let's get back into the questions here. Protein intake for an obese person. Okay, so this is a good question. So, if you always hear the generic recommendation, get a gram of protein per pound of body weight, right? So what if you're dealing with an obese person who is 400 pounds, right? Well, in this situation, what I would do is just simply do a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. So, if you're 400 pounds and obese, your lean body mass is somewhere probably closer to, 200 pounds, right? Now, I would probably go a little bit higher than that with an obese individual because protein is satiating, and having some excess protein can help them feel fuller, which can just help them from a dietary standpoint. So, if I'm dealing with a 400-pound individual who's obese, I'm probably going to use about 250 grams of protein. It doesn't have to be a perfectly exact calculation, but you certainly don't need to account for every pound of their body weight that is just dictated by a ton of fat mass. But I would lean on the higher end of protein, like I said, for its satiating effects. And then there's something called the thermic effect of food, where your body has to expend calories just breaking down and metabolizing protein. So your body has to spend a particularly high amount of calories breaking down protein, more so than carbohydrates, more so than dietary fats. So having a high protein intake is advantageous in a couple different reasons when dieting. You're going to burn more calories from just eating more protein. It's going to be more filling, more satiating. And then, of course, it's going to help you retain, if not build, muscle mass as you diet body fat off. So, for the 400-pound individual, like I said, I'd probably tailor it more to a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass, and then increase that by another 25% or so. Okay, let's see here. Next question. Sorry, guys, I'm just scrolling. I got a bunch of these. I'm scrolling through and finding one that, has some good talking points. Okay, what phase of dieting do you like to pair with peaking your strength? So that's a good question. So honestly, I really like to be in my, a peaking block or really selling out on strength when I am in a maintenance phase of diet. Now, you might assume, oh, you should coincide a growth phase with diet, a surplus with peaking for strength. Well, the reason I don't prefer to do that is when you're pushing a surplus of food, oftentimes you're lethargic. Oftentimes you're feeling sluggish, you're full, your blood sugar's off, your digestion is being challenged. Although, the surplus phase is when you've got the most nutrients available, the most, recovery resources, the most glycogen, all of these things, and it's probably facilitating growth. You're probably not feeling at your best. And how you feel when it comes time to train and perform is crucial from a performance standpoint. So I really like to grow and then drop down calories a bit to maintenance. And then when I'm in that maintenance phase where I'm big, but I'm just maintaining that size, I'm not pushing it higher with the food. So I'm eating a relatively comfortable amount of food. That is when I really prefer to put my eggs in the performance basket, because now I'm at peak size, which gives me the most potential to be at my strongest, but I'm not pushing food so hard that I'm uncomfortable and sluggish and just feeling like shit. So that maintenance phase is where I prefer to, really attack a strength block. Okay, what supplements are key for athletes? Basic vitamins that are useful for performance. So I really wouldn't say there's any supplement that is that is key for athletes. I think creatine monohydrate is going to be your most foundational, proven, tried and true supplement that I would encourage anyone to use, not just athletes. So first and foremost, creatine monohydrate, and that's a boring generic answer, but it's true. And I had another question on here regarding why is it recommended to use creatine monohydrate as opposed to other forms of creatine like creatine HCl. So this really comes down to creatine monohydrate is just been the most consistently studied form of it. It's a simple and very cheap form of creatine. You can get it anywhere it's incredibly inexpensive. And it has just been studied. It has been proven to be universally effective. So the reason you go monohydrate is just kind of, why would you go anything else? Creatine monohydrate's the version that's been studied. It's been proven. It's cheap. There's really no downside to it. Whereas there's still, you don't know quite as much about other forms of creatine, whether it's, bioavailability or any other factor. Now, one fun fact that many people don't realize is if you eat a high protein diet from animal protein sources, you're actually getting quite a bit of dietary creatine from your meat sources, which is why, vegans and vegetarians really should use creatine, and they benefit from it hugely as if they, got on steroids, because they're not getting any creatine from their diet, which most of us who are eating a high protein diet already are getting a decent bit of creatine, and then we're supplementing on top of it. So anyway, as far as key supplements for athletes, I would say creatine. And then just some basic vitamins, minerals that most people can benefit from, be vitamin D3, fish oil, zinc, magnesium. And then honestly, it's not necessarily quote unquote supplement, although it can be. Electrolyte intake. I just touched on this. Increasing your sodium and potassium intake in conjunction with fluid intake is huge, huge. It will take things to another level that you never realized hung in the balance of your hydration and electrolyte intake. And sometimes this comes down to supplementing with electrolyte powders like LMNT, or using pure potassium HCl or potassium chloride. So electrolyte intake, that is one that is very much slept on. All right, let's see here. Trying to find the next solid question. Your take on building a home gym versus going to a general commercial gym. I would love to have a home gym with all the equipment I want and need, just to have the luxury of being able to step outside into your garage or into your basement. There's nobody there. You can just be in your zone. You don't have to worry about battling for equipment. You don't have to worry about obnoxious people. So just having your own sanctuary where you're in complete control. It's time convenient. You don't have to waste time commuting back and forth. If you're someone who's incredibly busy and it's hard to find the time to train, getting a home gym would probably be a great investment for you. If you're someone who you just want to train and you don't want to encounter people, a home gym is probably great for you. If you're someone who trains with relatively minimalist equipment, you're not someone who's looking to use machines, you just want a rack, a barbell, a bench, and some plates, a home gym's probably great for you. Now, if you're someone who wants to use machines, you want to do bodybuilding style training or machine oriented hypertrophy work, you want a bigger variety of equipment, then you're going to want to go to a commercial gym. If you want the vibe, the energy of other people there, which often pushes people and people often respond well to that, you're going to want to go to a gym that has other members. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial gym. This can be, your hardcore gym for lifters and bodybuilders, where you're going to be around a demographic of people who are more serious minded about training. So like for me, I love going to a gym like the Strongman and powerlifting, weightlifting gym I train at in Raleigh, Spider Strength, because it's a community of like-minded people. It's a community of people who are serious about lifting, a community of competitors. And when you're in an environment like that, just being around people training hard, man, it's motivating. It pushes you. It's a vibe and an energy that I feed off of, which I can never replicate in a home gym. So there's pros and cons to both of them, and of course you got to worry about the money factor with a home gym. So good question. Um, Best bulking cycle. Um, for someone who's trying to grow, just you can't go wrong with testosterone and then pairing it with one other anabolic. I would always recommend going with something that is just tried and true, whether that's a little bit of Deca or Primo or EQ, something like that. I would never go with Tren or orals when you're trying to grow. Just those overly toxic compounds that, um, although come with their own benefits, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot, because you're probably limiting your performance. If you're taking something like orals, you're going to feel like shit. You're going to feel lethargic. You're going to feel nauseous. You're not going to want to eat, right? If you're using Tren, your sleep is going to suffer. So it doesn't make sense to get on a cycle that is going to negatively impact other areas of your development, like your sleep, your ability to eat, how you feel in training, your health metrics. If your health is going to shit, well, your recovery is going to shit too. So bread and butter, simple, basic, when growing, and the key components here are just push in training, objectively progress in training, have a good nutrition plan, be in a surplus, and you're going to grow. Okay, let's see what we got here. We'll hit one or two more questions here. Okay, my 14-year-old daughter wants to take creatine. Is it safe for that age? She's 5'10", 160 pounds. Yes. Yeah, there's been in the past some like fear mongering around creatine. No, creatine I would recommend it to anyone, whether it was an athlete, whether it was a teenager, or whether it was my grandma. Creatine has numerous benefits, and in particular, it's being studied a lot for its potential brain health benefits, being neuroprotective and having anti-Alzheimer's components. It's something that I would sign off really for just about anyone. Okay. I've got a few more here, but I think I'm just going to end on this one. Okay, red meat versus white meat, go. Okay, well, not a ton of context to go on here, but I'll just give some general thoughts. So if I'm working with someone in a fat loss phase, a lot of their meat intake is going to be lean meat, chicken breasts, shrimp, non-fat Greek yogurt, lean ground turkey, flank steak, things like that. Now, obviously, flank steak is red meat, but using these leaner sources of meat, obviously, we're reducing the fat. It's going to be lower calorie. And then I prefer to get the fats in from added direct fats like avocado and guacamole or almonds, extra virgin olive oil. It's just easier to control the amount of fat that you're intaking. We're getting the fats from healthy sources. And then all the meat we're eating, we're getting a majority of protein from it, right? If we eat chicken breast, there's 6 ounces of chicken breast. There's going to be a lot more protein and obviously a lot less fat compared to if you eat 6 ounces of 85-15 ground beef, which is going to have a lower protein count and a much higher fat count. So if we're in a fat loss phase, a lot of your food, a lot of your meat is going to be lean, chicken breast type stuff. Although on non-training days, I will increase the fats, decrease the carbs, and I often like to increase the fats in the form of going with fattier meat. So getting more of the red meat in, you know, sirloin steak, 93.7 ground beef, bison, salmon, chicken thighs, some of those fattier, more nutrient dense meats. So that's one of the upsides of the red meat and the fattier meats is they're going to be more nutrient dense. They're going to have more vitamins, minerals, natural creatine, things like that compared to your really lean meats like chicken breast. And of course, your red meats and fattier meats are going to be higher calorie, which can be advantageous if you're trying to put on size, if you're trying to put on weight. So to wrap this up, if I'm working with someone in a fat loss phase, they're going to get most of their meat from lean sources, white meat sources, with the exception of non-training days where they will have more of those nutrient-dense, fattier meats in there. Even if I'm working with someone who's pushing calories, I'll often include a lean source of meat as their pre-workout meal just to get something that digests quicker, digests easier before they train. But as far as the red meat, if we're really more focused, less on macros and less on calories, and we're more just focused on nutrient intake, or we're trying to get a lot of calories in, that's often where I'll use more of the red meats or fattier meats. So anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap up on that question there. I'll do this Q&A again here in a couple of weeks. You'll see it on my Instagram story on a Friday where I'll intake the questions and then answer them on the podcast and release it on Sunday morning. So stay tuned for upcoming guest episodes on Tuesdays. Follow me on Instagram. I'm putting out daily content, training, nutrition, and go to my website, hammerchiselperformance.com. And I'll catch you guys later.